And what did being an organizer teach you? We could start with Adlemy, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. If you could please give a brief background on your career path and why you chose the work you do, and what does being an organizer mean to you?
Awesome. Yeah. So I studied feminist studies in psychology at UC Santa Cruz, and I think that it was really awesome to be in two of those spaces, or to be in those two spaces, because what pissed me off about psychology was that it was talking about my people, and it was talking about Black and brown people in a way that like they were missing a lot. Like every textbook or every exam, I would be like, damn, like they really do think about us in this way, but they don't know. And I think that the part that would call on to me about that was that while I was in school, I, my mom went in out of jail. We lost the bedroom that we were renting. Like so much other shit was happening in my life that was the reason why I had experienced, the way it impacted the way that I experienced school. And it was pretty clear to me that trauma was part of my life story too. And so that's what inspired me to become an organizer. I had already been doing student organizing with E Square and Mecha. And so I feel like I had already been mentored by SIO and by other alumni to be a dope organizer. And so when I graduated, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I also knew that that my contribution to getting to liberation, to freedom, to ending capitalism was going to be that of organizing, because I knew that in me, that sort of like was the thing that made me happiest. And so like, anyways, so I chose to be an organizer, but specifically in the line of like ending mass incarceration and doing abolitionist work. My calling in that is both around understanding how like all forms of caging need to be eliminated and need to be, and that what we need is community to reclaim our power in the way that we are embody that power. And so that's really what my work is. Like I get to work with some really dope people that are, like our members across the state, and we get to really envision and bring to fruition our plans, to bring people home and to take care of ourselves as well, including healing. And what being an organizer has taught me, I feel like definitely to be patient, to be a good student, and to what I was saying earlier, like resurfacing and engaging with my traumas and really coming back to my center around like what it is that I feel, because it's kind of like you gotta come correct, right? Like I can't show up to a member meeting, I can't show up to my community with all these wounds that I haven't engaged with. I can't come back with all these like ways of like replicating trauma and oppressive systems and ways of being. So I feel like for me, organizing has taught me that there's a lot of work that I need to do on myself so that I can show up as my best self for my community, to be able to build cuts together, like to bring capitalism down. So yeah, check.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was pretty powerful. If you could like pass it to somebody else, that would be really nice. Like to the other panelists.
I'll
Tash
pass
or
it to
Keiera.
Keiera.
Oh, awesome. Hello everyone. So brief background of my career path. So I operate and own a small business called the Kei To Health. And so about 3 years ago, as I was making my transition to a plant-based life, I started cooking for people in my community, and one thing turned into another, and I decided to make it a business and to build off of this brand and educating people around me that are in low income communities and underadvantaged communities on healthy eating and how to make that a part of your lifestyle, even with the resources that are around us where I'm from in South Central LA. And so, as y'all were saying when you introduced me, I'm from South Central LA, and coming to UC Santa Cruz, I graduated almost 3 years ago now. Yeah, I was put on to like this idea of like healthy food being like super accessible and like super in your face, and you not really having to go and look for it because of the culture. And coming back home when I would visit on breaks, it was becoming more and more obvious to me that food disparities and living in a food desert is nothing, it's no coincidence, and it is nothing that is new as well. And so, just as Adlemy said, I also majored in feminist studies and study psychology while I was at Santa Cruz. And just having those two fields, and then being able to connect mental illness to food and to health and to sustainability just kind of fueled my passion for it. Being an organizer definitely taught me to be okay with failure, to be okay with things not working out the first or second time. It taught me how not to be fearful to reach out to people, and how to build, how to connect communities and how to bridge gaps. It also taught me how much you can get done without having a whole lot of money. And that is something that has been extremely important in what I do as I try to put people on to new ways of living, and realizing like our material conditions and like how much we really have to work with, even in my own journey of trying to be healthy and, changing a lot of cycles and a lot of cycles of disease and generational disease that may run in my family. So taught me how to be okay with failure, do things without money, bridge gaps. Um, yeah, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Um, I'll go and finish off this question. Hey y'all, my name is Tash. I feel really honored to be a part of this lecture series. About 11 years ago, I was sitting where you're sitting, but in one of those humanity lecture halls with like 90 students watching this lecture series. So it's pretty cool being here. My name's Tash, born in San Francisco, raised in San Jose. My family was evicted from San Francisco in the early 90s during a very early wave, one of many waves of displacement and gentrification in San Francisco. And in terms of organizing, I owe a lot of my organizing experience to my time at UC Santa Cruz as a student organizer in the Student Environmental Center. I was studying environmental studies and feminist studies. And so I worked on projects within the Student Environmental Center for 3 years, working to expand College 8 Garden, working to expand the Kresge Porter Garden, working to put solar panels on top of the Porter dorms. At the time, we were running the students were running the bike library program, and we worked to institutionalize that. Putting all those like water bottle refill stations. And so when I was a student, I thought, I'm going to be an organizer. I've always been a pretty planet-centered person as a means of, I think, coping with, living in a working class family. It always made sense to me. It's like we saved everything, we recycled everything, we like grew all of our own foods, and I kind of wanted to be a part of a movement that was really rooted in land and things like that. At the same time, I also had a lot of lived experience with some family members who were incarcerated, and then I also got swept up into some drug use in high school, and also spent time in a Santa Clara County juvenile hall. And when I went to college, I really like focused in on sustainability organizing as a means of both, finding some sense of self-worth, creating an impact, but also running away from what was really hard in my life. And as a lot of organizers know, the central part of organizing is really about building deep relationships, right? Building trust with folks. You need to build trust and build relationships in order to build community. And once you build community, then you enact change, right? And so when you're building relationships with people, you got to tell your story. And so I realized that I was actually kind of like omitting giant chunks of my life. And it wasn't until I was landing in a jail for, occupying the Bank of America and occupying Kerr Hall to fight tuition hikes in the UC system that I was like, oh shit, that lived experience was really fucking hard. And and this jail cell is like really bringing up a lot for me. And I think I need to work on changing these conditions. So I really pivoted from working on environmental climate justice towards working on ending mass incarceration. And I also think those two worlds are really deeply kind of like intimately connected, right? And so in terms of my career path, I worked on farms in Santa Cruz, many different farms in Santa Cruz and Watsonville while I was a student, worked in catering kitchens. As I was starting to build a grassroots organization that still exists in Santa Cruz, fighting against jails expansion called Sin Barras. I then got recruited to work at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland. So I moved. Oh, I also worked at UC Santa Cruz in the SOAR office as a program advising student organizations. So I lived in Santa Cruz for 7 years, got recruited to work at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, which was my first paid job in organizing, working on fighting jail expansions, moving money away from cops and sheriffs and into things that actually create safety in our communities, right? How can we build more parks? How can we build more safe havens? How can we make sure people have housing, right? Have a living wage, right? So that they can feed their family. And so how can we pull money away from things that don't serve us and make the county invest in things that do serve us? And then through that, I now work at this giant community hub. It's a building that houses many nonprofits that work on housing rights, immigrant rights, tenants' rights, ending mass incarceration, as well as a restaurant and a job training center and restorative justice. So I direct all the programs there. And if you've ever been to Fruitvale, we're right across the street from the Fruitvale BART station. And that's what I do now. And so in terms of the lessons that I've learned in organizing, I think that, back to relationship building, I think many of us have been socialized to understand that change happens through competition, through critical mass, through constant growth. And in fact, it's through building really deep relationships, listening deeply to what people need, what solutions they have, what's going on for them, that really actually enact change, right? People want to be seen. They deeply want connection. And we're seeing that right now in this crisis. And so that's really at the heart of what organizing is. And then the other thing is that, like, in order to change the world, in order to transform the world, you got to transform yourself. And so you got to be accountable to yourself, right? If you don't know what being free or what justice means for you, if you're not checking in with the people who are closest to you about the ways in which you're communicating or the ways in which you're in right relationship, how are you going to promote that in the world? So I think really working with your folks in your immediate circle in thinking about what mutual aid looks like and what accountability looks like and what showing up right looks like is really important.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Something that was common in a lot of your responses was talking about community, talking about support. So our next question is kind of feeding into that. How do you define community, and how has your work then shaped this definition that you have? And we'll start with Keiera for that.
I define community as a group of people who you share a lived experience with, and also people who in the simplest terms that you can depend on for things that you may or may not have yourself. So the people who kind of fill in the gaps for you when they need to be filled in, and the people who you can relate to through your lived experiences. So this could be like your neighborhood, or I know, like, for me and my culture, like, I have a lot of cousins who are not blood related, or I have a lot of sisters or brothers that are not blood related, but we have a shared lived experience, and we either grew up near each other or we know each other through generational like relationships. And I think my work, how has your work shaped this definition? I think for me, like the way that community works in my business and the things that I do is like, for me, like being super connected to like community centers or hubs where I know a lot of people gather. So out in LA would be like Lamert Park. So feeding the homeless in Lamert Park with organizations or businesses that are also around, and giving the resources that I have to like set up camp right there and make sure that the people are fed in Lamert Park, because we do have like an influx of Black homeless people that live near Lamert Park or in those surrounding areas. It also looks like me going and catering food or serving food to a elementary school that is in a food desert, where there's only liquor stores and there's only fast food places for them to eat at, and introducing them to something else and like kind of exposing them to that and opening up their mind. So I think I'm shaped by that definition because I always have to think about the people that don't have as easy access as I once have had, by traveling or going to school in another city, um, or even now being older and kind of being able to make my own money in a certain way and being able to afford certain things or be more exposed. So I think when I go back and I do workshops, or when I give my information out to people who I know wouldn't elsewise get it, I think that's how community shapes itself, like in my work and in my everyday. And also, just one thing that I learned with going to school in Santa Cruz and coming back home and visiting is that we learn a lot of language there that we start to think is just language that everybody understands or that everybody should know. And I think that one thing is like taught me is like how to relate to people and meet people where they're at, and not like speaking above or thinking that I am above anybody else because I had a certain type of education, but really meeting people where they're at and learning how to use what they have around them, the world around them, to kind of explain phenomenons and explain what it is they're experiencing. When you walk up and tell somebody like, oh, like, you know, you're sick because of the food that you're eating, it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as explaining economics to them or explaining systematic racism, but how, in what ways can I relate to them on a level that they're going to understand, to where they can still get the information and they can still be helped, because it's not as simple as telling people like, it's your fault that you're poor, it's your fault that you're unhealthy because you eat like this. So that's what community looks like to me, like reaching back, bringing people with me, making sure that people are getting the information that they need in the way that they can understand it.
Thank you, Keiera. Tash, would you like to go?
Yeah, for sure. Um, this is an interesting question. How do you define community? I think everyone defines community in their own way. I totally agree with Keiera. You know, people who have shared interests, people who have shared lived experiences, people who are geographically close, people have shared identities. And so to me, it's all about, the word that really comes to mind is proximity. And we all are a part of multiple continuously, right? I'm a part of a community of people who are touched by incarceration. Some of those people are queer, right? I'm also a part of queer community. Some of that overlaps. I'm a part of a Bay Area community. I'm a part of like a UC Santa Cruz community. I'm a part of like a more politically or radically conscious community. And so I think we're all a part of many different communities, both small and large. And some of the ways in which the question is, how has your work shaped this definition? Oh man, I think that in these times, it's, you know, especially with all of the news that we're inundated with, we think of our community as something that is far, 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 far bigger than what it actually is. And my work has taught me that until we have a sense of how to live out our solutions within our smallest communities locally, we won't be successful in implementing any type of just governance system regionally or nationally or even globally, right? Or in our global community. And so reminding ourselves that starting small is really good, right? What we practice at a small scale and reverberate to the largest scale and to the largest communities. And also something to remember is that, all living beings are a part of our community, right? And so, there's a question later about like decolonization. And so I think the land, the water, the earth, the soil, everything that that lives amongst us and with us are also a part of our community. And that the definitions of our community are always and ever evolving, right? Like God has changed, right? And I think that it's important for us to also remember that we each self involuntarily identify with our own communities, and that we're all learning from. We do have differences, but that it's ever evolving. And I think we're really seeing that in the gender justice movement in the last 10 years. We've also seen that in the environmental justice movement, which is now the climate justice movement, which is a more decolonial movement now. And so I think that there are a lot of lessons learned there. And what's really cool about it is that it's like young folks like you guys, or even younger than you guys, that are really kind of pushing the line of this ever evolving community.
Thank you so much, Tash. Lemmy, would you be able to finish us off?
Yeah. How do I define community? Hella messy. Like, I feel like community is like messy, it's hot, it's like, just like a lot of beautiful, dope things, like feeling like someone has your back, feeling like someone is able to like hold you down, show up for you. But also some of the tight-ass communities that I have, like we get into heated discussions, heated debate. Sometimes we don't hear each other, and sometimes we do. And so I think for me, when I was thinking about this question, I thought about how, and this is what I was saying earlier too, to question number one, that they are, that there's a way that our trauma like seeps through. I agree with what Keiera and Tash were saying around like trust, like to build community is also to move at the pace of trust. And Adrienne Maree Brown talks about that, as well as other movement leaders. And so it means that like community is like something that is precious, something that is like needs to be constantly in regeneration, in a regeneration process, where we continue to learn how to hold each other better, how to be with one another, learning to how to be with one another. All of us have experienced a range of harm. And sometimes when we come to community, we come with all of that and all of our full self, which is beautiful. And also it impacts how we view community. I also think that for me, like defining community, it's also, I think about ritual. I think about like, at least my ancestors, indigenous people, and how establishing a ritual, of how we are with each other, what we do when we are with each other, it's a ritual, I feel like, that we start to build. And that is one way to build resilience. And so I often think about community, and when I define it, like resilience comes up for me often, because it is the ways that that wonder, that love for life comes in. When I'm with my various communities, I feel more alive. I feel that so much is possible, and that we are able to build more with one another. And one that is difficult to keep. I think about boundaries, I think about like accountability. how are we able to keep accountability within our communities? And so that comes into the later question too, around how do we keep healthy communities. But that's sort of my definition. I feel like it's all over the place because sometimes that's what community is. And it's kind of like, how do we come back to the love that also holds community? How has my work shaped this definition? So I work with women with incarcerated loved ones, and that also includes formerly incarcerated people. And I don't know how much y'all know about like mass incarceration, but the way that it works, right, is like you have to put money in people's books so that they're able to purchase things that they need inside. It looks like going to visits for some people every weekend, driving far locations, like an hour, 2 hours to get to their loved ones. It looks like when they leave, when they are finally, for the ones that are able to return home, it looks like having a support network, a support system to be able to support people as they go through their reentry process. And so in the United States, women with incarcerated loved ones are the reentry system. They are the healing system. They are the system that holds all of these people inside together. And so my work has helped me define community as like, as a place of possibility that we need right now. And that because you have all these women with incarcerated loved ones coming together and supporting one another. That when someone's husband is not, has stopped calling, that they're able to connect and figure out, where is this person? Are they okay? Are they in solitary confinement? Are they in the hospital? And so in my work, the first time that I experienced this like network of women moving together and supporting one another is one of the first times that I was able to visualize like, damn, like this is how we tear the system down, because women with incarcerated loved ones leading the work is one way that we're going to do that. And so that's how what my work has helped define it. It's like around like precision and around like keeping our word when we say that we're going to show up for people, and being very clear with our intentions about why we're showing up. Yeah, check.
Oh, thank you so much for your responses, everybody. We're going to transition into the next question. Why is building community important for sustainability? Can healthier communities lead to a decolonized, sustainable society? I'll pass it to Keiera.
The question really has me stumped, but I'll start with the second question. Can healthier communities lead to a decolonized, sustainable society? I think that this question has so many layers to it that it is impossible to just answer one of them without thinking about another layer of so many different things, and depending on whose community you're talking about, that we have to go through. So like thinking about the community that I immediately come from, will sustainability or healthier communities in general lead to decolonized and sustainable society? I think that there are so many other things outside of sustainability that we have to think about when thinking about a more sustainable society in general. And I think that sometimes this is why a lot of communities tune out from conversations that have to do with environment, or have to do with sustainability, or recycling, or eating better, or any of those things, because there are so many other things that people in my community have to think about on the day-to-day that leave them outside of this conversation because their basic needs of survival are not met. And so thinking about the ways that sustainability can sometimes be kind of like inherently like prejudice, or leave people outside of the conversation without like even like recognizing it, is because I think that we have to have more than one definition of what healthy is. And we also have to, again, meet people where they're at. I think building community is important for a lot of reasons that have to do with sustainability, I guess, just education. So like just making sure that everyone is able to get the resources they need in order to be in the know, are informed. I think that building community, if we're talking about building relationships across zip codes, or if people that live on one side of LA where they have a whole lot more money and a whole lot more resources or privileges, are able to meet people all the way over in South Central LA, what does that look like, and how can we build the bridge between those communities so that way sustainability can be talked about on an even playing field? But I don't think the playing field is even close to being even enough to have conversations about how my community can be decolonized or be made more sustainable for society, because I just think it's so far-fetched, because I have yet to see ways in which that work has started to be done there, or how people from outside of my community have came in and tried to help, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. But I think that's why this question is like so like loaded to me, just because there's just basic needs of survival that have yet to be met for folks to start thinking about what sustainability looks like to them, and what sustainability looks like in my community may look different in somebody else's community. So I think I would love to hear from what the other two panelists have to say, because yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, you're welcome to pass it to whoever.
Let's go with Lemmy.
Yeah, I feel like, yes, thank you, Keiera. I feel like you were sort of getting at why I also felt a bit like stuck on the question, because I'm like, damn, like why? Okay, I'll start with the first question. Why is building community important for sustainability? Because that's the only way that we're gonna get to sustainability. Like, I for real like feel that in my body, and feel that in like my assessment of the current moment, of the current conjuncture. Like, I feel like building community and doing that well, investing all of the ways that we need to be able to build community and figure out how to do it, I feel like it's the way that we're gonna get anything done, from climate justice to abolition to freaking bringing down capitalism, is going to be by building community. It's gonna be by being able to like hold one another. It's gonna be by being able to distribute the labor, to bring on the talents of people, to like just be able to take on this massive work that that has been able to oppress us in different ways, and by doing oppression, delivering all kinds of traumas to everybody. So I feel like building community, the reason why is because that's the way to do it, and it's the way that we're going to win. And can healthier communities lead to a decolonized, sustainable society? I feel like a lot of like the word decolonize gets thrown around so much, and I sometimes get mixed up on like the meaning of it. Similar with resilience and similar with community, they become these buzzwords that at the root of them hold so much power. Because decolonization, for me, as it relates to community, literally like is about like rethinking how we relate to one another, how we relate to the earth, how we relate to land. Like, it is about we are stewards of nothing. Like, we are in a symbiotic relationship with the earth, and so that carries a different level of responsibility that we have as people. And so I feel like decolonization and community, going back to really thinking and going back to indigenous teachings about how to be in right relation with earth, with one another, is a way that I feel we build healthy communities. It's a way that we're able to lead to a sustainable, or reach a sustainable society. that is able to feed one another, that is able to like flow with one another. And that is a very politicized action to do all of that, because to me, that action of this like little cycle that I described is a direct threat to capitalism. It's a direct threat to ending imperialism. And all of that is necessary. It's sort of like, for my work as an organizer, is the type of work that I need to be doing, especially if I'm fully committed to liberation. Check.
Cool. Yeah, I think we all have a lot to say about this question. I think what I'm like really hoping to break down, and I think we're all trying to break down, is like the word sustainability and decolonization. They're such loaded terms. And if I'm going to be honest, I think sustainability is a really Anglo term coined by white people that just hasn't aged well, and really no one is using anymore, especially in the climate justice movement that is much more racially conscious. And I think we just like need to do away with it and like take on new words. You know, change is good. It's fine. And so I think, and I say that because I think that is definitely a term and a vision coined by white people that probably did not include Indigenous and POC folks in its vision, right? But I think what we can do is we can take the values of what sustainability promotes into movements that we all know, because there are 80 people in this class, are important, right? And so like I pulled up, okay, what does sustainability really mean, right? The ability to be maintained at a certain level or rate. Okay, what level, what rate of what, you know? Or the avoidance of depletion of natural resources in order to maintain ecological balance, right? So to me, what sustainability really means is resilience, right? Stewardship, consciousness of our lived environment as well as our neighbors. And to me, it's not just about like maintaining things at a certain level or rate. The certain level and rate of things that they are right now is completely out of balance and out of whack, right? What are we trying to restore and return to? None of us have lived during an era where the world was a sustainable place, right? And so that's why decolonization and learning from the original stewards of all of the lands in which we currently live on, right? So in Santa Cruz, it's the Ama Mutsun people. In the Bay, it's the Ohlone folks. We're all part of the larger Ohlone tribe, right? Learning how those folks cared for this land, learning how they're currently stewarding their land, learning how to preserve people's cultures and rights and rituals and traditions and maintaining their sacred sites, right? And learning how to be in like a right way of relationship with one another. And so that's why my work, I'm going to pull in a little bit of my work. I haven't talked about it much, but I work on restorative and transformative justice. And what is that, right? It's a form of building community and trust with one another. So we bring folks in, folks who live in proximity, folks who are neighbors, folks who have been in conflict with one another, and we get to know each other. We try to rebuild relationships and move through harm and conflict with one another, so that, right, if you know all of the folks, for example, at my job, I convene folks who live within 3 blocks from my building, right? Do you know if you've been raised in the same place for 5 or 10 years, do you actually know all of your neighbors, so that if a harm or conflict were to happen, you'd know who the doctor is, or you know who who could do a tourniquet, or who you could borrow flour or eggs from, or who could mediate any type of domestic violence conversation or situation, or that there's a particular safe house in your neighborhood. We don't have those infrastructures in place, and that's why we rely on really unhealthy infrastructures that kill and marginalize and warehouse Black and brown people. But if we actually took that down to a local level and built trust, through forms of restorative justice or transformative justice, we would actually learn how to live more sustainably within our means and trust each other, right? So to me, being in community, yes, it's important. Can healthier communities lead to decolonized, sustainable society? I think it's the other way around. If we decolonize our way of living, we will then live in a healthier community, right? And being in community means learning how to practice being in democracy, learning how to make decisions, right? Making compromises together, learning how to adapt to change and make adjustments, right? And learning how to, I think, even learning how to like, how we propose ideas to one another. The ways in which we propose ideas to one another are incredibly competitive, right? Completely unsustainable. We steal, we abstract, we push and shove our ideas onto other people. And actually what we need to be doing, and through a decolonized way, is collective ideation, collaborative ideation. If you look at US history or international revolutionary history, no one group ever created change on their own, right? It required a united front, many different strategies, many different tactics, many different relationships, right? So I think the questions that I'm asking myself, I think this question actually doesn't lead to more immediate answers, but encourages us to ask ourselves and our communities other questions. And so I wrote a few down, right? What do we need to, hold on, where is it? How do we prepare not just for suffering or the lack of suffering, but for sharing and for innovation, right? Especially during the coronavirus. How do we resource the local while also honoring our tendency to be nomadic and to be moving around, to migrate, right? Sustainability is so locally based, but people naturally migrate. It's important for us to think transnationally and our global interconnectedness. And I think sustainability movement really has to be helping us think that way. And how do we center, what Keiera and Lemmy were sharing? It's like, how do we center those who are most marginalized, those who have the brightest ideas and solutions at the front of building this new world, right? Keiera was saying earlier that, like, as an organizer, I know how to make a lot with a little. That is hella fucking sustainable. Like, folks in the hood where I live here, like, would not know what I would be saying if I was like, yo, what does sustainability mean to you? But if I were like, yo, how do you survive and thrive with what you have? That's actually what I think this question is trying to get at. And that's what we should all be thinking more collectively and more deeply.
Great. Thank you guys so much for those answers. We're going to move into a short break, 5-minute break. So we would like to start back up again by 6:30. With that, I just also want to encourage people to ask questions and to make sure if they feel comfortable to leave an asterisk. But yeah, we'll move into the break for 5 minutes.
Can I get a thumbs up? People are ready to begin, and Sue be posing the questions so we can get into groups, talk about it with each other. Okay, so the question is, how does COVID-19 affect the communities students belong to? In what way is it harder, easier to connect with others?
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are a little short for time. We did have 2 other questions, so I did want to open it up for our panelists to kind of leave some closing remarks, some last comments about some important things that they want to leave off the class with, and then we'll move into the Q&A portion. So starting with Tash, do you have any last comments or additions to anything?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I guess I'll just try to answer question 5. That I have a very short answer to that question. So the answer to question 5 is living in a climate crisis. how can people take care of themselves, their communities, and the land? And I think that's very connected to what we talked about in the breakout. I think as individuals, please work on getting really good at where you put your energy and letting go of the things that don't serve you. You know, I think a lot of us are like back home with our families or even living in isolation, and it can get really hard, and we can so let go of the things that don't serve you, and yeah, put your energy where it's worth, and that way you can give all you can, from a really well resourced place when the storm comes. And the storm is here, you know, change is not coming, it's here. And so I just think that, yeah, that's important. And to, you know, learn about, like, use this time to learn about who the original stewards and the original native folks of this land that you're on are from, and help them sustain their own livelihoods, and their own cultures and their own sites. So yeah, that's my closing remark.
Any last comments?
Hey, Tash, when you get a chance, could you jot down the different farms that you've worked for in Santa Cruz?
We have a portion for Q&A that we'll still have.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, Lemmy, would you like to continue?
Sure, yeah. I feel like all of the things that we're talking about are not things that we're going to solve while all of us are in shelter in place. They're not things that you're going to figure out, like, you know, in like 2-3 months. These are, I feel like, life journeys that all of us are entering into or have been in, of that, of like building community, of being in a symbiotic relationship with the land and with earth, you know, of like building trust, of like building community. All those things take a lot of time, and I feel like we are living legacies and examples of people that have gathered together and that have successfully built something for people to then build onto the next and to the next. I believe that the journey of like healing, which I believe individual healing is also needed for the work that we're talking about here on this call, or in this class, is one that requires also like, yeah, like internal healing, and without like humility. I feel that resilience, also like learn about that for yourself. I think that's one of my last, like, what does resilience look like for you? And what does it like help you do? Because I think that we need to like think and wonder and be curious about solutions, and about like what are contributions, what you want your contribution to be for the larger movement, whatever it might be. So I feel like those are just like my closing thoughts. And just like also like love yourselves. Like I sometimes just put my hand to my chest and like show myself some love, because at least in the circle, in the breakout group that I was in, like people are going through a lot, and it's okay to feel a bit confused and to feel like maybe you're not doing enough and all those narratives. It's okay, and know that community building is happening, and it's going to take a minute, but you got people to do that with. Check.
A word. Okay. My last thoughts, thinking about this pandemic and everything that's going on, I just really keep thinking about how, because like how Tash was saying earlier, sustainability is such an outdated and it's a term that has like excluded people. I think about how now within this pandemic, those same people are the ones that are most affected by COVID-19. And so I was seeing an article yesterday about how many people have died in New Orleans from the virus, and thinking about like how many of these people are Black and how many of these people will be affected because of their pre-existing conditions, because of their environments that were already not healthy enough for them. And so now how during this pandemic they are the ones that are most affected. So just always thinking about relating to people, and whenever you think something is so like commonsensical, like thinking about who it won't be such like common knowledge to, or who it won't be commonsensical to, and how you can relate it back to those people. Whenever you understand something, just think about the people that don't understand it, and think about why they don't understand it, and what events are going on that leave them continuously out of the loop, and how can we be saving people's lives by giving them information. I feel like some information is treated so elitist that it just stays within a certain group of people for a certain benefit, and it's truly unfortunate because when things like this happen, we see who's most affected by it and who is gonna have to recover the hardest from it. So that's something that I've been sitting with and revisiting during this time. And yeah, as has been said, please do take care of yourselves and only take on what you can take on. I mean, I feel like this is a time where energy needs to be very specifically directed, and just making sure that you are always learning through that too.
Great, thank you so much. Now is our portion for Q&A. So the chat monitors have gathered the questions that folks have asked. Class does end technically in a minute. If folks are able to stay on until 7 or so until the questions are answered, that would be wonderful. So yeah, chat monitors.
Yeah, so the first question is what is by Ellen and what it's for Tash. What farms did you work on and any recommendations?
Oh yeah, I worked on Everett Family Farm, Silva Orchards, Happy Boy Farms, Dirty Girl Farms, lots of farms, lots of farms, all within like Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Corralitos areas.
Thank you so much.
So the next question is from Yesenia, and she asks, I want to know if you all have social media accounts that everyone can follow, or a website to keep looking at the work that everyone's doing.
Word. Should we leave it in the chat?
That'd be great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the second question is from Sonia, and they ask, how do you think we could bring about a sustainable global community? Education, restrictions, and coercive policies, practices, innovations, materialistic mindset, etc.
For me, I think one of the ways could be to go and connect with organizations, groups of people who are already in certain areas, already doing the work of being out in the community. They may not be focusing specifically on sustainability or environment type of topics, but they are already in reach of the community. Go to people that the community already trust, and maybe, you know, like that is the way that when you graduate or when you're on your breaks, or if you have information that you have to give to folks, that you can like connect the people through these centers or organizations that already exist, and do like free workshops or pamphlets or anything like that. I think word of mouth is incredibly powerful, but also just being on the ground and connecting with folks who are already there. You know, I feel like when we go to school, we're at school and we kind of keep those things like in the university. And then when we go home or we go back to our communities, we kind of separate ourselves from the things that we've been doing at the university or the things that we've been learning at school. And I think it's important to like bring those things back to wherever your community may be, because you never know like what other community it may reach. So that's just one way that I can think of. I don't have all the answers, but there are already people most likely doing the work where you are trying to go. So just getting to people that are already trusted and helping them come together with a plan on how to educate folks. Yeah.
Yeah, to go right, I feel like, um, I think that it's a different, I don't think that it's either or. I think that it's about like utilizing the right strategy and when to use it, and how are we like resourcing ourselves to have different strategies. I think policy change is one of them, valuable, right, to engage in a process of like civic engagement. But so is political education, so is like building community, so is like, you know, like organizing on the ground, organizing nationally. So I feel like all of these are layers of the ways that that we need to implement to be able to like create an impact, and the impact that we can create together. But also, I mean, the thing with that too is like that doing that in a cohesive way and in a precise way is like not easy. But I feel like many of us are trying and figuring out how to do it. But sometimes we're a bit like I don't know, like not working in unison or like not talking to one another. Because you know, like there's different organizations that do different work. Some focus on policy, and others on like community building. Yeah, and like it's also like people themselves, right? Like some are like really activists and advocates online, but I ain't talking to people like one-to-one and people in the world in real life. So I think about it's just like not a straight answer. I think it's like about figuring out for yourself and the type of impact you want to make, and like lining yourself up with that line of work, and figuring out, continue to think creatively of what ideas, if there are policy changes, how the policy changes happen matters a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to not be repetitive. I think your question is a huge question and actually begs us to ask ourselves more questions in order to get at that. We're living in a time right now where we have more to like, this is not a time of giving answers. This is a time of just offering what you can offer, what you have the heart to offer, what you have the material resources to offer in a way that is safe. And I think as we learn, as we offer things to each other, we are then learning how to offer better, right? To actually meet people's needs. And I think, you know, what I was saying earlier, the word sustainability to me equates resilience. And we have to move beyond resilience, because the ways in which we have survived now is unsustainable. The ways in which our ancestors survived can no longer work. And so we actually have to transformatively adapt, right? And so I think the questions that I'm asking myself is, how does this moment require us to do more than just survive? What non-traditional care structures work better? What can an invisible virus teach us about the climate crisis? How can we make sure nurses run the motherfucking healthcare show? And what are the ways in which this moment is and is not polarizing, and how, to what Keiera was saying, inequities are exaggerated during this pandemic, and how can we get like underneath at the root causes of that? And I think once we figure out how to offer some, create some offerings to those questions, we will then get at what you're talking about in building a sustainable global community.
Great. So that's actually the end of the questions from students for y'all. Facilitators, take us away.
Thank you so much again for everybody being here. Your combos were enlightening. It's been a great time just to hear your thoughts and to gain some fresh new perspectives on some things. Really put us in check with that sustainability though. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much for being here though. Greatly appreciate it. I don't think we have any closing or reminders. Thank you to everybody else who was here present for this.
Yeah, to any students who may have asked questions about class logistics, you will be emailed separately. Yeah, thank you panelists, and thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, everyone.